We're back here in extra rounds as we march toward the UFC Fight Pass Invitational number 5, and we are joined now by a familiar face. He won EBI 20, the Absolutes, and picked up more gold and hardware last time out on the FPI stage. It is Nicky Rod, Nick Rodriguez. We appreciate you joining us. Nick, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
The FPI is, sort of this up-and-coming show. The UFC has attached its name to submission grappling, and whenever the UFC attaches its identity to something, obviously the lights burn a little bit brighter. There's pomp and circumstance, and you've done well on the platform. What was it like last time out, shining the way that you did in that tournament?
Yeah, the past UFC Fight Pass Invitational was a blast. You know, it went heavily in my favor. I was able to submit most of my opponents and win in a dominant fashion. And I look to do it again this upcoming event.
You know, you obviously have competed on big stages throughout the sport, but when you're going into the UFC Apex, does it feel a little bit different, or is it similar to those big other stages in submission grappling?
Well, I would say that it's definitely an honor to compete in front of the UFC audience. You know, I think that I know what kind of role UFC has played in submission grappling. You know, like there'd almost be no high level jiu-jitsu if it wasn't for the mixed martial arts fans. You know, and we definitely I like to pay tribute towards the UFC towards the UFC and the UFC fans. And yeah, I'm just out there competing. I like the idea of competing in a stage or in a building where there's bloodshed constantly when it comes to UFC fights inside the Apex. But when I compete, I have a tendency to just treat every competition the same. You know what I mean? I don't get too emotional, whether that means emotionally high or emotionally low when I compete. So I stay pretty stable. But definitely, I feel honored to be able to compete in front of the UFC audience.
I like that. There's almost violence in the air when you enter the Apex. And I've talked about this with you, BMAC, a bunch. It's a full circle moment for me for the UFC to come back and sort of shine its light on submission grappling, because without Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I don't think there's a UFC, at least not the UFC that we know today. And obviously with the UFC being what it is today, it's only right for it to shine its light back on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, and I love that the UFC is trying out different rule sets so that they can kind of pick out what is it that's really going to make this event pop for everybody. Nicky, you've competed at the UFC Fight Pass Invitational under the EBI rules. This one is going to be under a different rule set. How has your training changed between your last time with the UFC Fight Pass Invitational and this time?
Well, leading up to the past UFC Fight Pass Invitational, I was doing a lot of EBI rounds, EBI overtime rounds, just because most of the EBI matches do lead to overtime. You know, typically there's only a submission in jiu-jitsu if there's a big skill discrepancy within a 10-minute period. So, most of the EBI rounds do go to overtime. And this upcoming event, I just kind of left out the EBI overtime training. I've done most of my I've done all of my jiu-jitsu, to be well-rounded, both in control, in point scoring, and in submission, chasing, submission, completing. And yeah, just kind of left out the EBI overtime rounds. So I was able to sharpen up different parts of my game.
What do you think about the opponent coming into this thing? I mean, like, you're going up against Yuri. You've had obviously like huge success in the ADCC rule set, but Yuri's maybe one of the more successful guys that's ever done the ADCC rule set. How does that affect you going into that match? Or do you not even think about who it is and what the rule set is all that much?
Yeah, Yuri Simōes is a 3-time ADCC world champion. He won the past absolute world championship. And he's a tough opponent. He's weathered. He knows how to play the game. I'd say he's a tactician more than he is a technician. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to going out there and compete. I have a tendency to adopt my game plan towards certain rule sets and towards certain opponents. And Yuri's no different. I understand his strategy and what he's going to try to do in the matches, and I know what I'm going to try to do. And yeah, I just have a focus on going out there, having fun, scoring a lot, being dominant, and controlling my opponent so I get the submission.
Nick, you're familiar with Yuri. You guys met at ADCC a little over a year ago. Anything from that match, something that you can use to apply towards the tactics and strategy in this upcoming match?
Yeah, so we had two matches. First match when I was I believe a purple belt. I was able to pass his guard multiple times on the flow grappling who's number one, Matt. And then the second time we competed in ADCC, and nothing really happened in that match. He won a tight decision. There was no takedowns, no scrambles, just a very boring wrestling match. And it was mainly due to I wasn't as focused as I should have been going into that match. I was like, I remember right before I went out there on the mat, I was focused. I was like on my phone, posting on social media, and I hear my name called, and I go out and compete, as opposed to doing my typical pre-match routine. So that was a mistake on my behalf, and I make sure I never make the same mistake twice.
What is your goal? Obviously, you want to go out there and win, but is it a certain way you want to win? Is there something that you want to impress upon the fans that are going to watch you compete again on the FPI stage?
Yeah, the plan's to win in a dominant fashion, show my ability to control an opponent, show my ability to stay on top and win in dominant fashion. I wouldn't be satisfied unless I submitted my opponent.
As we close out the year here, I mean, what do you think the next year holds for yourself? What does 2024 say for not only maybe Nicky Rodriguez, but submission grappling as a whole?
Yeah, submission grappling is on the rise. We've seen in the past 5 years it's grown massively. Since I started this sport, I'm about 5 years into my jiu-jitsu career, and I've been competing against the best guys in the world since year one. So for me, it means progress and continuation of growth. And for the sport of jiu-jitsu, well, I'm really looking forward towards this upcoming ADCC World Championships. We're going to be in T-Mobile Arena. Plans to sell out. We sold over $1 million in tickets in the first like 30 minutes of the ticket sales. So, that event is on everybody's mind, and may the best man win.